This podcast is talking about angles, very high and very low angles of recipient sites for hair transplant design. A recipient site is the little needle entry that is the hole, if you will, or the pocket where the graft will be placed into. There are two principal methods of site creation, which I can go into more detail another time: parallel and perpendicular. And I prefer parallel sites from the majority of my cases. And there's two major reasons I like parallel sites. One is the fact that they allow me to dense pack a little bit better. Another reason is also they minimize transection of other hairs, and they also allow the ability to see the flow of hair, the way it goes. Now, all these are very difficult concepts to convey without a visual with this. But I won't go into too much detail about parallel sites. I'm going to talk about sites that are very low angled, why that's important aesthetically, and also why they can be more dense packed in a certain way. And then I'm going to talk about very high sites, and why those can be dense packed in a certain situation. So the two situations I'm going to talk about for low angles is going to be eyebrows. An example for high angles is going to be the crown. So what is a low angle? A low angle means the recipient site is placed very close to the surface of the skin. It's almost flat. So the hairs grow out almost flat. And that's so critical for the eyebrow transplantation. And I'm going to be talking about this next week in India for my keynote address. So one element of this eyebrow transplant, which we've talked about in a previous podcast, is that the sites are very, very low. Now, I'm going to talk about site competition, which means that one of the things that competes for the ability to make the sites very close together is not making one site join accidentally a site next to it. Otherwise, the grafts fall all over the place. They don't fit. So the sites cannot touch one another. But the goal is to make these sites very close together, especially in the eyebrow, because the eyebrow is an area that you can only put in a few hundred grafts, and so every graft counts. If you are very sparse in that area, you're not going to get a good density. So the sites that I make are all sort of flowing in a pattern that looks like an eyebrow, for the lack of a better word. It looks like, they call it falling dominoes, a fishbone design, but they all sort of go linearly across. Making these parallel sites that are low angled, in other words, they follow the flow of the hair, I can dense pack them when they're parallel sites. If they're perpendicular sites or sites that go at a different angle, I can't get these sites densely packed. So that's one of the reasons why I make these sites in these parallel fashion. You may want to Google what a parallel site is. It's very hard to describe this without actually having a visual on this. And then for the crown, what's interesting is that because the crown is actually in a whorl pattern, in a circular pattern, the sites actually compete in a different way. And so if I make those sites very low, they actually competed with each other too much. So I actually make those sites very high angled. And then there's less competition because, in other words, the sites don't join accidentally underneath the skin. The other point of this is why in the crown do you need a very high angle? In other words, like when I make the site, the hair is growing almost not quite 90 degrees, but 60 degrees out. Because when you look at a balding person from the side view, they're actually looking balding from the side view, not just the back view. And so when you have those hairs grow upwards and outwards, it actually creates more volume in the back. And that's very, very powerful, both for men and for women. A lot of women complain of a flattening effect of their crown area. So high angles are in the crown and low angles are in the eyebrow, because eyebrows, if the angles are high, they look totally fake. So these are just ideas of design. I mean, you probably won't understand all the details of this podcast, but suffice it to say that different parts of the scalp require different levels of different angulations, different heights, all those things, and there are reasons behind that. So this podcast really talks about how I design recipient sites in different regional parts of the scalp in different ways, some high, some low, and how can I dense pack them based on minimizing joining those sites underneath the skin.